Thank you very much, After Singh, for making it to my office here in the University of Nairobi. And my name is Kenneth OMBONGI. I'm the chair of the Department of History and Archaeology here at the university, actually one of the oldest departments in the University of Nairobi that started way back in 1956. Now, my relationship with the local Indian community goes far back as when I was an undergraduate student in the 1990s. And at that time, I had quite a bit of interaction with members of a local Indian lobby group called the Eastern Action Club for Africa, 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐡 in short. And we worked very closely together. Actually, that is where I, for the first time, interacted with a member of the Sikh community who was the vice chairman of 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐡, Mr. Singh, who is late now. But generally, as a way of introduction, I'm also the current chair of the Kenya-India Friendship Association, KIFA. I became a member of KIFA way back in the 90s when I was a small boy in undergraduate studies here in the university. And then later on in 2014, I actually took over as the chair. I took over from a former member of parliament for Lang'ata constituency here in Nairobi, Honorable Mwangi Maathai, who handed over to me. And the East African, not the East African, but KIFA, the Kenya-India Friendship Association, was formed way back in 1983. And it was formed then when the Indian Prime Minister visited India and met some local Africans and Indians and suggested that why don't you form this? And then KIFA was formed. But away from that, it has given me really a platform that has enabled me to interact not just with the local Indians, but also visit India, not once, not twice, but many times. Of course, besides the fact that I have this interesting triple heritage in my education and training, because especially at university level, I did my education here in Kenya, in Africa, for my bachelor's and master's degree. Then from there, I proceeded to Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, where I did my MPhil on modern history of India, specializing more on intellectual history of modern India. And then from there, I actually went to the University of Cambridge in the UK, where I did my PhD from. So I have this triple heritage, one African, another Asian, and of course, European, which has given me some advantage in interacting with people from all sorts of life, from all walks of life, as it were. Now, back to the subject that we are talking about this Nairobi afternoon is the Sikh community. And you find that actually, historically, the members of the Sikh community are among the earliest Indians, not just in Kenya, but in Eastern Africa. And as early as the 1860s, you had members of the Sikh community crossing Eastern Africa from the coast in Mombasa to the interior through what could become Kenya to modern day Uganda at the time, when the means of transport and communication were not what we know it today. They used to walk on foot. And one of these earliest caravan traders was a Sikh called Sardar Kala Singh. in fact, from whom many Africans came to know the members of the Sikh community. Is because they used to hear the name of Sardar Kara Singh, and they assumed that everybody who wore a turban is a Kala Singh. So the Sikhs locally actually are called Kara Singhs from Sardar Kara Singh is name. And this is a Sikh trader who was here from the 1860s onwards. Now, of course, when you move towards the last days of the colonial period, some key members of the Sikh community stood very strongly in support of African nationalism and the struggle for freedom in Kenya. And always the name of the trade unionist Mahan Singh comes to mind. Mahan Singh was, a very principled, from what we read in history, he was a very principled politician, as it were, an accomplished trade unionist. And he had, among his friends, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, who was the leader of the Kenyan nationalist movement of the time. And when Kenyatta and his friends were rounded up by the colonial government at the height of the Mau Mau movement against colonialism, Mahan Singh was also arrested. And unknown to many people, actually the longest detainee, Mau Mau detainee, was actually not Mzee Kenyatta, was not the famous Kapenguria Sikhs. It was Mahan Singh, who was detained for 11 years. And then after that, he was deported to India. But he left an indelible mark as one of the leading supporters of of the Kenyan freedom struggle. Of course, there are other Sikhs who were in different professions. The name of Justice Janan Singh comes to mind, a fairly prominent lawyer, and later on joined the Kenyan High Court as a justice. Of course, there is also the name of the famous rally driver, Safari rally driver Joginder Singh. When we were growing up in the 80s and late 80s and early 90s, the two prominent Indian names in the country, one of them was Joginder Singh as a rally driver, and they won East African Safari rallies not once, not twice, several times. And of course, there was the celebrated Shaka Mehta. His name went hand in hand with that of Joginder Singh. And believe you me, because of Joginder Singh's prominence, there are young African Kenyans who were given his name. I know one when I was the chief executive officer of one of the hotel schools here in Nairobi, the Kenya Utalii College. I had an employee called Joginda, named after Joginder Singh, because of his prominence in rally driving. In post-colonial Kenya, particularly in political circles, we had the guy I mentioned earlier, Mr. Swaran Singh Sudi, who was a personal friend. In fact, I will hasten to mention that Mr. Swaran Singh Sudi was the. I stopped at a point in which we were talking about some of the prominent Kenyan members of the Sikh community. And I was talking about my very good friend who is late now, Mr. Swaran Singh Sudi. Mr. Swaran Singh Sudi was one of the founder members of a political Indian lobby group, one of its kind actually locally here, called the Eastern Action Club for Africa, IACA in short. Local Indians are known that they shun politics. They want to concentrate in their business, in their professions, and they have generally sort of, except a few, left politics to the local Africans. But then Mr. Swaran Singh Sudhi, with a group of local Indians, such as Amin Wadri, who was the chairman, Mr. Salim Talib, who was the secretary, Mr. Himat Divani, who was the treasurer, and members like Dr. Jayendra Divani and many others. And Swaran Singh Sudhi was actually the vice chair. Swaran was a vice chair, but really the brainchild behind making things happen. I worked very closely with this group because I was invited by Swaran as most of the time the research and administrative officer a number of times, and I was responsible for drafting most of their press releases and documents at the time. But one thing that I came to appreciate about Swaran Singh Sudhi was his diligence in his work and also commitment, not just to his business, because Swaran was a businessman, but also on the cause that he believed in: fairness, justice, equality, and equity. In fact, the tagline for the Eastern Action Club for Africa was equity and equality for all. The Eastern Action Club for Africa emerged in the early 90s at a time when a few Kenyan politicians started calling for, this idea that Indians must go. I remember one of the local politicians, Martin Joseph Sukuku, who was in the front line. So the lobby group was formed as a response to this, and they did a very good campaign, particularly in the 90s, in the press and all that. And by mid 90s, this backlash against local Indians had subsided, thanks to the efforts of Swaran Singh Sudhi and the group of local Indians that he was working with. Now, of course, generally, besides, of course, Sudi working in this political outfit, I also knew him as when he was the secretary of the Nairobi Gymkhana. And at the time, we worked together to produce a book during the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the history of Nairobi Gymkhana. And we did that booklet together. I'm sure if you go to Nairobi Gymkhana Library, you'll find the book there by myself and Mr. Swaran Singh Sudhi. Of course, beyond the realm of politics, beyond the efforts of Mahan Singh, beyond the efforts of Janan Singh in modern professions like law, we have had members of the Sikh community, particularly in business that involves artisanship. A number of them are actually running, you know, mechanic businesses. They are known for their artisanship, and many of them got their way into the Kenyan civil service, particularly, they were members of the police force because of the very well-known martial characteristics of the Sikhs and all that. Many of them are, a number of them are in construction. While I was running one of the institutions in this country, I worked with one of the leading Sikh contractors, Mr. Rani Singh, who is also a very good friend of mine. Of course, besides that, the Sikhs are known for their role in social service. The services of Guru Nanaki Hospital are very well known. The services of one of the earliest Sikh Gurudwara in this country, famously called the Sikh Tembo in Makindu, on your way to Mombasa. It's very well known. Anybody who has driven that road, I think if you have not had your lunch and a free lunch in the Sikh temple in Makindu, then you do not know what you are missing. And I think when you look through history, even the early colonial period, when the colonial government thought of involving the Indians in the local economy, they encouraged the migration of Sikh farmers. A few of them settled in a place in southwestern Kenya called Kibos, near Kisumu, just adjacent to the Lake Victoria. And many of them thrived as farmers, of course, before the colonial government put a break into encouraging Indians to participate in the agrarian colonial economy. But of course, much more recently, we have had prominent members of the Sikh community globally playing a leading role, and I have in mind the name of the personality you are studying, Mr. Raghbir Singh Bains, who we all know has played a leading role in actually bringing very, very important knowledge about Sikhism to the people of the world. Dr. Singh Bains wrote this very famous encyclopedia of Sikhism, which is a one-stop shop for anybody, so to call it, for anybody who wants to know anything about Sikhism. And he pioneered this in multimedia format at a time when this technology was not very widely appreciated. And I think he played a leading role in this. And I also know that he established the famous Sikh Museum in North India, which is also done in multimedia technology, which are technology that many museums are looking forward to embrace, around the world. So, as a leading scholar, as a leading environmentalist, and a crusader for justice and fairness and understanding of religion, I think he's one of the leading personalities in our world today, and that's why when you came to my office and let me know that you are doing your PhD on the life and times of Raghbir Singh Baz, I said, "Well, that's a great work to do, and I wish you well, and I look forward to reading your PhD thesis on this great man."